Today's story is about the family disappointment, the nurse son, the one who wasted his potential. His father built a real estate empire worth tens of millions. His brother got the VP title on day one, and when Joshua's daughter was born, he got a $20 bill in a generic grocery store card. But when his father showed up at his house with a loaded gun pressed to his 4-year-old's head, demanding he co-sign a fraudulent $2.3 million loan, this disappointment had already wired his entire house for surveillance, had armed backup 4 minutes out, and had been waiting for exactly this moment. What happened next sent his entire family to prison. All 4 of them. My dad yelled, "You choose, your loan signature, or your 4-year-old daughter's." My own dad said, Mom just laughed and said, "Your life means nothing to us." My sister kept my daughter from running, and my brother forced the papers in my face. When I refused and tried to pull her away, everything went wrong in a second. The first thing I noticed when my father walked into my living room that day was how out of place his suit looked against everything in it. Custom Italian fabric against the secondhand couch Mara and I had picked up from a local listing 3 years back. His hand, the same one that taught me how to tie my shoes, was wrapped around a black handgun with the barrel pressed flat against my daughter's temple. Hazel was 4 years old. She'd stopped crying. She was frozen, wide eyes locked directly on mine, clutching her little blue plastic dolphin with both hands. Her knuckles were completely white. My sister Chloe was crouched right behind her, diamond rings glinting under the lamp, both hands clamped down on Hazel's shoulders so she couldn't run. She was whispering fake little comforts into Hazel's ear in that syrupy voice she only uses when she's performing. My brother Carter shoved a stack of legal documents into my chest, loan papers, $2, $3 million of co-signature liability, and held out a pen. My mother Diane leaned against my kitchen counter next to the bakery box she'd brought along as some kind of prop, and she was laughing. Not nervous laughing. Full, satisfied laughing, like she was watching her favorite show. "Sign the loan papers right now or else," my father said. Robert Whitmore, patriarch, community pillar, gun to his own granddaughter's head. I refused to take the pen. Carter shoved me back hard. I stumbled over my coffee table and hit the hardwood floor. The breath knocked straight out of my lungs. And then the gun went off. The sound was physical. It punched through the air and rattled the walls. Hazel crumpled sideways, slipping out of Chloe's grip and falling to the carpet in a heap. My brain went offline. There was maybe 2 full seconds of nothing. And then I heard her crying. She was okay. Robert had flinched when I lunged and fired wide. The bullet went into the ceiling. Plaster dust floated down over all of us like snow. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because to understand how a wealthy grandfather ends up pressing a loaded gun against a 4-year-old's temple in a suburban living room over a stack of paperwork, you have to understand the Whitmore family from the bottom up. You have to look at what was underneath the reputation. Hold on, let me jump in here. For the listeners, this is me, not the OP talking. I need a second because I want to make sure this lands right. Robert Whitmore, respected businessman, charity golf sponsor, the guy who got his own name on a hospital wing, just fired a gun inside his son's house with a toddler in the room. Diane's reaction was to stand in the kitchen and laugh. These 4 didn't lose control. This was the plan. Captain Legacy and the crew showed up with a bakery box and a loaded weapon like it was a normal family visit. Buckle up because the backstory is somehow worse. To the outside world, the Whitmore family was local royalty. My father built a commercial real estate development empire over 40 years. Office buildings, mixed-use properties, commercial leasing across 3 counties. The kind of guy you saw in the newspaper shaking hands with the mayor, his name on a hospital wing. People respected him. Behind the iron gates of the estate, the whole thing was a straight-up dictatorship. Carter was the golden child. Firstborn son, groomed to take over. Sports cars for birthdays, fully paid Ivy League tuition, vice president of acquisitions handed to him the literal day he graduated college, despite barely passing. He spent his days barking orders at men twice his age and running up the company card on lunches that stretched to sundown. Chloe was the princess, raised for one specific purpose: marry well and expand the family's social reach. She nailed it when she locked down Dylan, a successful investment banker. Their wedding cost more than most people make in a decade. And then there was me, Joshua, the middle child, the constant grinding disappointment. I never cared about real estate portfolios, or corporate acquisitions, or country club politics. I wanted to actually help people. When I was 18 and told my parents I was going to nursing school to become a pediatric nurse, you would have thought I'd announced I was joining a cult. The Thanksgiving dinner right after I got my nursing license is when I understood fully and finally what I was dealing with. I'd brought Mara, my girlfriend at the time, a public school teacher. My mother looked her up and down like she was inspecting furniture at a garage sale and sighed loud enough for the whole table. A teacher and a male nurse. How quaint, Diane said. Tell me, Joshua, how do you plan to survive on that salary? We don't subsidize mediocrity in this family. Mara squeezed my knee under the table. I kept my voice flat. We do fine, Mom. We enjoy what we do. Robert snorted from the head of the table, carving the turkey like it had personally insulted him. Changing bedpans isn't work. Carter just closed a $12 million deal this week. That's real work. You're embarrassing the Whitmore name. Same script every time. But I watched Mara absorb it across the table and made myself a quiet promise. We built our own life, paid for our own house, drove older cars, budgeted grocery trips, not a single dollar from them. And we were genuinely happy in a way I'm not sure anyone in that estate had been in a long time. When Hazel was born 4 years ago, I made the mistake of thinking a baby might soften them. I called from the delivery room, voice cracking with that specific tired joy you only feel in those first hours. Diane answered on the third ring, already put out. Oh good, tell Mara congratulations. I have to go. They're starting my highlights. Click. They didn't come to the hospital. 3 weeks later, a store-bought card arrived with a crisp $20 bill. Buy the baby something nice. Meanwhile, when Chloe had her 2 kids, Robert set up trust funds immediately, and Diane practically moved into Chloe's place to play the devoted grandmother for all her wealthy friends to admire. Hazel didn't exist to them because I didn't exist to them. I eventually made peace with it. Mara and I built a solid wall around our little family. Hazel became the center of everything. A bright, laughing kid who chased butterflies, collected seashells in a little bucket, and was completely certain dolphins were magical. I never argued the point. We started her college fund. We had everything we needed. For 3 years, genuine peace. I thought the worst they could do was ignore me. I was dead wrong. Pause for a second. Let me get in here because this next part is where things turn. Joshua has built an actual good life. Steady job, great wife, kid who collects seashells, college fund already started. He walked away from the empire, didn't take a dollar, and built something real with his own hands. And then, 6 months before that Saturday with the gun, his father showed up uninvited with a briefcase full of papers. Just walked in like the last 5 years of silence meant nothing. What follows is a story about what happens when a guy who's been underestimated his entire life finally stops playing defense. The nightmare started 6 months before that Saturday, on a rainy Tuesday evening. I'd just finished a 12-hour shift at the Children's Hospital. We'd coded a 7-year-old earlier in the afternoon, and my nerves were still completely raw. I turned onto my street and saw Robert's car parked in front of my house. Custom license plate, unmistakable. He was already sitting in my living room, completely uninvited, drinking the coffee Mara had nervously poured for him. He didn't stand up when I walked in, didn't ask how I was doing. He pulled a thick stack of legal documents from his briefcase and set them on my coffee table like a subpoena. We're expanding operations, a major commercial development bid downtown, he said, slipping into his CEO voice without warming up. The bank requires all immediate family members to co-sign the guarantor forms to spread the liability matrix. It's a formality. I need your signature here, here, and here. I stepped forward and flipped to the second page. $2.3 million. Are you out of your mind? I asked. I'm a pediatric nurse, Dad. I make a decent salary. I'm not sitting on $2 million in assets. I am not signing my family's future to your corporate debt. The mask slipped. Under the confident businessman I'd feared my whole life was something darker, desperate and cornered and genuinely frightened. You owe this family everything, he said, his voice dropping. Every breath you take is because I put a roof over your head. You will sign this tonight. No, I said. Get out. He stood up so fast his chair scraped across my floor. He kicked my coffee table hard enough to send my favorite ceramic mug spinning off the edge and and shattering on the hardwood. You ungrateful little coward. You have 24 hours to change your mind, or I swear I will ruin your pathetic life. He stormed out and slammed my front door hard enough to knock a framed photo of Hazel off the wall. Glass everywhere. That night, Mara and I sat at the kitchen table staring at the documents he'd left behind. She looked pale. Joshua, massive companies do not force estranged sons with modest salaries to co-sign multi-million-dollar loans unless they are completely out of options. Something is seriously wrong here. She was right. I took some of our savings and hired a forensic accountant to dig into Robert's company finances independently. Took 3 days to get the picture. The $2.3 million had nothing to do with a downtown development project. That was a cover story. Robert had a gambling addiction he'd hidden from everyone for over a decade, bleeding the company through offshore high-stakes games. But the dangerous part, he didn't just owe banks. He owed a man named Cameron, a violent operator connected to organized crime. If he didn't pay Cameron by month's end, things were going to get physical. His plan was to push through a fraudulent bank loan, using my clean credit history as the anchor, pay off his debts, and leave me holding the collapsing bag when it all fell apart. My own father was going to use his son's name and his son's family to cover his criminal debts. He would have watched us go bankrupt and lose our house and called it a necessary sacrifice. I didn't just call him to say no again. I went straight to a lawyer and sent a certified cease and desist letter. No further contact with me, Mara, or our home. Done. That was the exact moment the Whitmore family declared war. Wait. Let me step in because I need to appreciate this properly. The man's plan, his actual strategy, was to forge a loan application using his own son's identity to pay off mob debt, then walk away clean while Joshua's family lost everything. And when he got a legal letter saying no, the response was coordinated multi-front retaliation. What's next? Showing up to Hazel's daycare with a PowerPoint. King Whitmore thought a cease and desist was the opening move of a negotiation. The entitlement it takes to go from "I need your help" to "I will ruin you" inside 48 hours is genuinely staggering. Keep going. It gets worse before it gets much better. The retaliation started the next morning. Diane called and screamed until my eardrum rang. I told her I'd been dead to them for 30 years already and hung up. Blocked her number immediately. 2 days later, Carter showed up at my hospital. I was mid-shift on the pediatric floor, carefully checking the IV line on a frail 7-year-old leukemia patient, when I heard shouting in the hallway. I stepped out and found Carter violently shoving past 2 hospital security guards, face flushed red, suit jacket half wrenched off his shoulders. "There he is!" he bellowed, pointing a rigid finger directly at me across the entire ward. In front of nurses, patients' families, my colleagues. That's him. He's stealing heavy pain medication from the supply closet. My brother is a junkie. You need to drug test him right now. The hallway went dead silent. This wasn't just screaming. He was trying to take my medical license. He was trying to take away my ability to feed my daughter and pay my mortgage. Before Carter could get out another word, Julian, the hospital director, former military trauma surgeon, a man who had worked actual combat zones and was not easily impressed, stepped out of his office. He walked up to Carter and looked at him the way you look at something unpleasant on the bottom of your shoe. "Sir," Julian said, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority, "I personally run full random drug tests on my entire staff monthly. This nurse's record is spotless. You are trespassing in a pediatric ward. Security will remove you now. If you resist, we are pressing charges." The guards grabbed Carter's arms. "This isn't over, Joshua. We will ruin you," he spat as they hauled him backward toward the elevators. I was shaking in the hallway, but they weren't finished. Chloe went after Mara next, targeting her school directly. Overnight, anonymous emails went to the school board with detailed claims that Mara was emotionally volatile and prone to outbursts, with hints at an active child services investigation. The school knew Mara was a stellar teacher and didn't fire her, but protocol required formal documentation in her permanent file. That kind of flag follows a teacher for years. Mara came home with the printed emails in her shaking hands, a framed photo of Hazel pressed to her chest. "They want to squeeze us from every angle until we just sign it to make it stop." I told her I wouldn't let them win, and I meant it. But what was happening inside me wasn't fire anymore. Something colder. A lot more focused. The final escalation came a week later. I walked out to the hospital parking garage after a late shift and found all 4 of my tires slashed straight through, rubber shredded. Spray painted across the driver's side door in thick, dripping red letters. Sign it or accidents happen. I stood in that garage in the cold, the smell of aerosol paint burning my nose, and understood what had just shifted. They weren't threatening my finances anymore. They were threatening my life. I called Mara. Calm voice, careful words. Pack a bag. Take Hazel to her parents' place, 2 towns over. Don't post anything. Don't tell anyone the destination. Just go. She heard my tone and didn't argue. I stared at the red paint and made a decision. I wasn't going to file a police report that would sit on a detective's desk for 6 months. I wasn't going to apply for a restraining order that a man with criminal connections would treat as a speed bump. If the Whitmore family wanted scorched earth, I was going to be the one holding the match. My lawyer, Veronica, sat across from me and listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned forward. A restraining order is just paper to people with mob debts, Joshua. It won't stop them. What we need is to let them come to you, and make sure that when they do, they hang themselves so thoroughly that no defense attorney on earth can save them. We trap them. She made a call. That call connected me to Aaron, a former military intelligence officer running a private security firm. Aaron didn't do standard alarm systems. While Mara and Hazel stayed safe at her parents' place, Aaron spent 2 days turning my house into a surveillance fortress. Pinhole cameras fitted inside smoke detectors in the hallway. Wide-angle lenses concealed behind books on the living room shelf. High-fidelity audio receivers wired into the base of the kitchen light fixture. A small camera stitched carefully into the seam of Hazel's stuffed blue dolphin, the one she dragged everywhere. Everything fed in real time to a secure encrypted cloud server. Even if they physically destroyed every device in the house, the footage was already uploaded and beyond their reach. Aaron handed me a heavy silver pendant on a leather cord. It looked like a regular piece of men's jewelry. There's a wide-angle lens in the center, he said. Streams live via cellular data. More importantly, it has a panic activation. Pick a safe word, something you would never naturally say in a normal conversation. The moment you say it, my monitoring team bypasses 911 and dispatches directly to your location. Armed response in under 4 minutes. I rolled the pendant in my palm. Emergency assistance. Done. He typed it into his system without looking up. For the next week, I baited the trap. I made sure word reached a mutual acquaintance I knew would carry it straight back to Diane that Mara was out of town for a weekend work seminar, leaving me home alone with Hazel all day Saturday. I knew they would see it as the perfect window. A man alone with a small child. Maximum pressure. Maximum vulnerability. I was right. Okay, stop. Let me talk to you for a second because I need you to appreciate this. Joshua spent 30 years being told he was the weak one. The disappointment. And these people, who built their whole identity around being smarter and more ruthless than everyone, could not conceive of the nurse son outplaying them. They thought money equals intelligence. They thought he'd fold. They had no idea he'd already spent 2 weeks wiring his living room into a broadcast studio. He didn't just set a trap. He invited them to step directly into it. Princess Country Club and King Whitmore walked right into a 4K recording. Everything that happens next is entirely their own doing. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon. Hazel was on the living room rug building a block tower, working on it with that specific 4-year-old intensity. She'd been at it for like 20 minutes and had already rebuilt the base twice. I was in the kitchen pretending to read a medical journal, eyes drifting to the front window every 30 seconds. At 2:15 p.m., a black SUV pulled into my driveway hard and fast, bumping over the curb. All 4 doors opened at the same time. Robert with his leather briefcase, Diane carrying the bakery box, Carter cracking his knuckles, Chloe adjusting her sunglasses. They walked up my front path in a line. I touched the pendant under my shirt, breathed, opened the door. Robert pushed past me without any greeting. The others filed in behind him. Carter immediately positioned himself near the front door, folding his arms to block the exit. Diane walked into my kitchen and dropped the bakery box on the counter with a loud smack, scanning my clean home with open disgust. Chloe crossed into the living room and went straight for Hazel. "Hi, sweetie," Chloe cooed, dropping to one knee right next to my daughter and clamping both hands down on her shoulders. Hazel instinctively shrank back, gripping a wooden block tight. Robert set his briefcase on my coffee table, popped the latches, pulled out the stack of papers. "This ends today," he said, his voice dropping into that quiet register I always found more frightening than his yelling. "We are not leaving this house until you sign." "I told you I'm not doing it," I said, loud and deliberate, making sure every syllable reached the audio receivers in the ceiling. "That debt is yours. You gambled it away. I am not making my family homeless to cover your criminal mistakes." Diane laughed from the kitchen. "Your life means nothing to us. Trash like you owns nothing worth keeping. Sign it or we will take Hazel and call child services. And trust me, we have enough friends that it will stick." "You have no legal right to be in my home," I said. "Get out." Robert's face went through something I'd never seen on him before. The mask dropped completely, and underneath it was pure, unhinged desperation. He reached into his jacket. The gun came out slow and deliberate, and the overhead light caught the metal. He racked the slide, a bullet chambered with a sharp metallic snap. This was not a prop. "Here is how this works," he said, his voice completely flat. "You sit down at that table, sign every page I've marked, and then we all leave like one big, happy family." I reached into my pocket. Carter lunged so fast I didn't have time to react. He slapped my phone out of my hand, and it skittered across the hardwood and under the sofa. He shoved the papers into my chest. "Just sign the documents, Joshua. Stop being dramatic. This is a family matter." Diane smiled from the kitchen. Her eyes were bright. "We handle our own problems. We always have." I looked at Hazel. She was trembling. She'd stopped trying to understand what the metal object in her grandfather's hand was and had just gone somewhere else in her head, staring at the carpet with her dolphin still clutched in her fists. Robert stepped forward and lowered the barrel to the side of her head. "Sign the loan papers right now," he said, "or else." I looked directly into the hidden lens of the pendant on my chest. "Emergency assistance," I said clearly. Every syllable. Robert looked confused. "What are you babbling about? Sign it." "I will not let you destroy her future," I said, stalling, counting seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. Robert's finger visibly tightened on the trigger. I lunged, threw my full body weight forward, aiming to knock him backward, putting myself between the gun and my daughter regardless of what it cost me. The gun went off. The sound was enormous and physical and wrong in a way that doesn't translate into words. Plaster rained from the ceiling. Hazel crumpled to the carpet, and my brain just flatlined. Then I heard her crying, screaming in pure terror, and I dropped to my knees and ran my hands over her head and her back and found nothing. No blood. Robert had flinched when I moved, and the shot had gone into the ceiling. Before he could lower the gun again, my front door came off its hinges. Not opened. Off the actual hinges, hit by a steel battering ram. The windows blew outward into the yard. A wall of black tactical gear flooded into my living room. At least a dozen SWAT officers, rifles raised, multiple red laser sights painting Robert's chest. "Police! Drop the weapon! Drop it! Now!" The gun clattered to my hardwood floor. Matthew, the squad leader, crossed the room in about 2 seconds and took Robert face first into the floorboards. Carter threw his hands up and started screaming in a pitch I'd never heard from him before. 2 officers swept his legs and put him down hard. Chloe released Hazel and backed against the wall, shrieking as an officer cuffed her from behind. Diane didn't get 3 steps from the counter before she was shoved against it and cuffed. I grabbed Hazel off the floor and pulled her into my chest so tight I was afraid I'd hurt her. I buried my face in her hair and just shook. She was okay. She was here. She was in my arms. Once the room was fully secured, Matthew hauled Robert to his knees. Robert's nose was bleeding onto my rug. He looked around at the tactical officers and found the composure to start talking. "This is a family dispute," he said. "He attacked me first. I was defending myself. You need to listen to me. I'm Robert Whitmore." I walked over and stood directly above him. I pointed to the pendant on my chest, then to the smoke detector, then to the bookshelf. "You didn't just threaten me, Dad," I said. My voice was completely steady. I didn't expect that. "You performed for an audience. Every word, every threat, that gunshot. It wasn't just recorded. It was broadcast live to a secure cloud server. and to this police department in real time. They saw you pull the gun. They heard you put it against her head. They watched all of it. He followed my finger to the smoke detector. His eyes went wide and kept going. All the color left his face at once, like someone pulled a drain. Diane stopped laughing. Her mouth opened and nothing came out. Carter started hyperventilating on the floor. "Get this family out of my house," I told Officer Matthew. "Hold on. I need you to sit in that moment for a second. Robert Whitmore, 40 years of building an empire, 30 years of making his son feel like nothing, just had the entire picture explained to him by the guy he had a gun on. The smoke detectors were cameras. The bookshelf had a lens. The pendant was a live feed. His whole "we handle family matters internally" plan was on a cloud server the police had been watching in real time. That is the face of a man who spent a lifetime underestimating the wrong person. The trial's even better. Pull up a chair. Final update. The immediate aftermath had this specific eerie quiet to it. Red and blue lights strobed across my street. Neighbors stood on their lawns watching the Whitmore family get walked out in handcuffs. Carter came out first, sobbing so hard he couldn't walk a straight line. As they pushed him past the porch light, I noticed a dark stain spreading down the front of his khaki pants. He wouldn't look up. Chloe came out fighting, screaming about her rights. The officer guided her head down and closed the cruiser door on her shrieks. Diane found my eyes as they walked her down the path. The viciousness was gone, replaced by something that looked like desperation, but wasn't really remorse. "Joshua, please, we're your family. Tell them it was a misunderstanding." I turned my back and walked inside. I heard her through the wall before the car door cut her off. Robert was last. Silent. No arguing, no commands. Whatever fight he'd walked in with was gone. He shuffled past me looking hollowed out. Mara arrived 10 minutes later, having driven like a maniac from the moment Aaron's team alerted her. She came through the shattered doorway, dropped her bag, and we met in the hallway and just held each other. No words for a while. Veronica showed up while the investigators were photographing the bullet hole in my ceiling. She handed me a paper cup of water with the calm of someone who'd already reviewed the footage and liked what she saw. "The audio is pristine. The video is undeniable. They're buried, and they're not getting bail." 8 months to the trial. Their defense team tried every angle to get the footage thrown out, argued that recording in a private residence without consent violated state wiretapping law. Veronica dismantled it in about 20 minutes. When you force your way into someone's home to commit armed coercion against a minor, your expectation of privacy doesn't survive the door coming off its hinges. Every frame was admissible. The prosecution kept it simple. They set up a monitor in front of the jury, dimmed the lights, and pressed play. 20 minutes of silence broken only by the sound of my family destroying themselves in 4K. Robert pulling the gun. Diane laughing from the kitchen. Carter shoving me into the table. Chloe pinning my daughter still. 3 jurors covered their mouths when the barrel pressed against Hazel's head. When the lights came back on, Robert's attorneys were staring at their legal pads. You cannot cross-examine a video. The prosecution wasn't finished. On day 3, the courtroom doors opened and Dylan walked in. Chloe's husband. The investment banker my parents had always adored. Chloe's head snapped up and she started whispering frantically to her lawyer. Dylan walked to the witness stand and didn't look at his wife once. He testified that he'd filed for divorce 3 months earlier and was pursuing sole custody of their kids. He described Chloe coming home the week before that Saturday and bragging about how they were going to squeeze me until I broke. She told me that sacrificing Joshua's financial future was the only way to protect her inheritance, he said. She was willing to let her own niece be traumatized, or worse, so she wouldn't lose her lifestyle. Chloe's defense that she was an unwilling participant died right there. Then came Carter. His attorney had been arguing misplaced filial loyalty, a scared son following orders. The prosecution called a forensic accountant who'd spent 6 months digging through the company's frozen assets. While Robert Whitmore was funneling funds to cover gambling debts, his son Carter was simultaneously draining the company through embezzlement. Over 5 years, Carter approved fraudulent vendor invoices for services that never occurred, routing over $4 million into offshore accounts in his own name. The courtroom erupted. Robert's head snapped toward Carter. Genuine shock, then pure fury. He lunged across the defense table and got his hands on Carter's collar before the bailiffs pulled him back. Carter had his face buried in his arms, openly weeping. Diane sat completely still, watching the architecture of everything she'd built collapse into rubble in front of a jury. Robert's gambling had pushed the company to the edge. Carter had already hollowed it out. The $2.3 million I was supposed to sign would have fixed nothing. There was nothing left to save. The jury deliberated less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge looked down at the four of them and said, "In 30 years on this bench, I have rarely seen greed and cruelty quite like this. You viewed your own son not as a person, but as a financial instrument. And Robert Whitmore, you pressed a loaded firearm against the head of an innocent 4-year-old girl. Robert got 23 years in maximum security. Given his age, he's not coming home." Diane received 18 years. The judge specifically noted her laughing during the assault as evidence of a complete absence of empathy. Carter got 7 years for assault, kidnapping, and coercion, plus a separate federal embezzlement case that added another decade. Chloe took a plea deal, 5 years, and she lost custody of her kids. Dylan won. The civil suits came after. Veronica filed against everything they had left. Courts sided with us completely. The estate went to public auction. The company was liquidated. No inheritance. Nothing. 3 years have passed since that Saturday. We didn't stay in that house. Too much had happened in that living room for us to want to eat dinner in it. We sold the property, packed everything up, and moved 3 states over to a quiet coastal town where nobody had ever heard of Robert Whitmore, and nobody cared. I found a position at a local pediatric clinic with a team that genuinely respects the work. Mara was hired at a great elementary school inside a month. Our combined income is more than enough. We bought a house with a big backyard, a wooden swing set, and an ocean view from the back porch. Hazel is 7 now. She's in 2nd grade, obsessed with marine biology, and drags Mara and me to the local aquarium on weekends specifically to see the dolphins. She had some hard months after that Saturday. Nightmares. Waking up screaming in the dark, scared of loud sounds. Mara and I spent a lot of nights sleeping on the floor next to her bed, holding her hand, telling her the loud man was locked away in a cage and could never come back. With time and patience and a whole lot of love, she came through it. She draws colorful dolphins in her sketchbooks now. Her laugh is back. She's a confident, happy, loudmouth 7-year-old who knows she is fiercely protected. Letters still arrive from the Department of Corrections every few months. Diane asking to speak to Hazel for 5 minutes, complaining about her cellmate. Robert demanding I call his appeals lawyer. I walk straight from the mailbox to the shredder in my home office and feed the envelopes in without opening them. I listen to the sound they make. It's a very satisfying sound. They are dead to me. That chapter is permanently closed. What I took from all of this is simple. Blood doesn't make a family. It just makes you related. Real family is built on respect and loyalty, and choosing each other when everything is hard. Mara holding us together when things were terrifying. Hazel trusting me to keep the monsters out. That's family. The rest was just genetics. I built the life they said I was too weak to build. And when they came to take it from me, I let them walk right through the front door and lock the cage behind them. Look, Joshua's story doesn't end with a clean bow on it. Hazel had rough nights for a while. The house had a bullet hole in the ceiling when they packed the moving truck. Real life doesn't do clean endings. But what this man did, quietly, methodically, while being told his whole life he was the disappointment, is about as cold and calculated as it gets. He didn't beg. He didn't fold. He built a trap, set the bait, and waited. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Could you have held it together in that moment? And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button. New stories drop every week.